Hello, I'll be discussing W.B. Yeats and his At the Hawk's Well in relation to his reinforcement of the Irish identity. And I will start by outlining some basic information about Yeats himself, because the historical context of the production of this play is quite significant. William Butler Yeats, also shortened to W.B. Yeats, was born in 13th of June 1865 into a Protestant Anglo-Irish minority, which at the time was established as the economic, political, social ruling class of Ireland at the end of the 17th century. Yeats himself, however, was very much rooted in his identity as an Irishman, even though a large part of his childhood was actually spent in London, not in Ireland. Yeats met John O'Leary in 1885, and to some it is considered that this was the turning point in Yeats's life. O'Leary, by the way, was an Irish patriot who had returned from exile for his nationalistic and revolutionary activities. O'Leary was strongly interested in the Irish cultural heritage, and some suggest that his influence was what made Yeats turn towards Irish legends and folklore as an inspiration for his poetry and later on his plays. However, the plays wouldn't start until more than a decade later in 1899, when Yeats' The Countess Kathleen was first staged in Dublin. 3 years later, he would be a part of the supporting group that sustained Irish actors in staging George Russell's Deirdre, another Irish legend, and his own Kathleen Ní Julian. The success of these stage productions would lead to the Irish National Theatre Society and the renovation of the Dublin Abbey Theatre. The theatre opened in December of 1904. It was at this point where Yeats' first play of many featuring Cuchulainn was put on stage, this one being On Bale Strand. Now, At the Hawk's Well itself was performed in 1916 and was published a year later. It's a one-act play and was the first play written in the English language to feature characteristics of the Japanese no plays. There are notably a small number of characters, all of which are listed in the slide here. The 3 musicians, the guardian of the well, an old man, and a young man. The staging of the play is extremely simple. The backgrounds consist of a piece of cloth, while the well is a simple blue square on the ground. And the masks themselves simplify the characters as well. With the masks on, the audience has no way to distinguish facial expressions, a factor in drama which is often exaggerated. But the masks serve another purpose, this one to establish character. They're not people, nor actors playing characters, but are more suited to ideological stand-ins that are meant to represent something larger than what we see on stage. I'm not going to go into the contents of At the Hawk's Well in detail, but I do want to touch on the symbolism of the young man, not just as Cuchulainn, but also as Irishmen in general. And this is significant because it ties heavily with the identity of what it's like to be an Irishman. I found Yeats' infatuation, is one way of putting it, his interest in Cuchulainn to be rather interesting because it showcases Yeats' hopes for what he wishes the Irish to be. One instance of this is the young man's youthful passion for battle. At the Hawk's Well, we see this contrast with the young man and the old man. When there is a battle to be fought with Aifa, Cuchulainn finds the battle to be a lot more promising than eternal life, and he leaves the well, though the old man stays. The contrast between the two are clear. The old man is, in a way, displayed as a fool, as the well speaks of unfulfilled promises, lies, and deception, as the old man has wasted years and years of his life trying to drink water from the well, only to fall asleep when the waters do appear. But what about the young man who loved the well? Well, we also know that by legends that in Cuchulainn's youth he was quite successful in conquering Aoife and has a son with her. His passion for battle is well told in the old man's, "You are like those who are crazy for the shedding of men's blood and for the love of women. And there is no house to sack among these hills, nor beautiful women to be carried off." Cuchulainn here is displayed as a conqueror, a victorious warrior who is successful in his endeavors, and his wish to chase after these very real conquests is what drives him away from the false promises of eternal life. He does not waste his life instead of like the old man does. And in some ways, I think the plot that Yeats has chosen is very purposefully done. Eternal life is something that is occult, mystical, unreal, but glory and battle and conquest are arguably very real things. Yeats does not want the Irish to be the old man, who, like a fool, wastes time and falls asleep and spends their life to be chasing after falsehood. Yeats wants them to be the young man, who is passionate and is not led astray from pursuing things that are very much obtainable in real life. It is also notable that Cuchulainn speaks to the better identity that Yeats hopes to forge in Irishman, because Cuchulainn in his legends is notably undefeated until he is deceived. His geas grant him strength, and should the geas be broken, his strength would vanish. So, of course, his geas of being forbidden to eat dog meat is broken when the very contemporary social taboo of turning down food offered to one is challenged when somebody offers to feed him dog meat. In the end, it's his unwillingness to be uncordial. It's what robs him of his physical strength. He would rather be weak than to be rude, and I think that's important because it showcases a very noble identity that Yeats would have taken into account when looking for a figure to subscribe the Irish identity to. However, it also shows that in the end, Cuchulainn is not defeated in an honorary battle, but rather he's tricked, and I think that's a very important factor. So even though the Irishmen, though they may be descendants of Cuchulainn in mind or inherit a strength and nobleness, the reason why they go through these hardships is precisely because they have been tricked and deceived into these hardships. They themselves are not at fault for what happened to them, but rather it is the actions of those who take advantage of their nobleness, like the English, who take advantage of their nobleness and kindness that are at fault. So why would Yeats come out with a play like this? Well, the simple answer is that the young man symbolizes the young Irish soldiers of the World War I. They have to go to battle even though it's not necessarily under the Irish flag. The battle calls for them and they have to respond. The British called for roughly 200,000 Irishmen to be drafted into the military, so they have to go. The Irish battalions served in the Battle of Gallipoli. They were there at the recapturing up to the Somme and many more battles. So in a simple sense, the young man is the representative of drafted Irishmen who must go into the war. But it may also symbolize the young lives who were sacrificed in order for Ireland to gain independence. Young lives were killed in the Easter Rising, would again be killed in the Irish War of Independence, and some suggest that the old man in this case refers to Ireland, who begs the young man to stay. However, I do think there is another symbolism at play. For one, the young man may very well symbolize Ireland himself, while the old man symbolizes the United Kingdom. I find it interesting that despite Yeats' attempts to frame the Irish identity with a legendary undefeated warrior, there's no violence within the play. And you'll notice that there is no physical conflict between the two men. It's in fact the old man who's greedy for the water, and the young man merely proposes to share even what few droplets the well may give. And we know that Yeats was not an advocate for violence in securing the Irish independence. His poem Easter 1916 showcases how he was distant from some of the leaders of the Eastern Rising because of their call for violence and, well, some other personal issues, but the point is that the young man parts without a problem or physical violence away from the old man who, at the end of the play, actually begs him to stay, and the young man doesn't look back. Instead, the young man moves on to the battle with Aoife. And I think there is a very clear parallel with a young man and what Yeats hoped for the Irish independence to look like. I believe that this was his way of making his hopes known, considering that the first draft of the play was in January of 1916, a few months before the Eastern Rising, when plans of the Rising was about to be set in motion. Here are some discussion questions that you may want to think about when you are reading At the Hawk's Well. Apart from his then recent interest in No plays from the Earls of Pound's translations of them, why would Yeats choose No's plays as an inspiration for At the Hawk's Well? The second is, some interpret the old man to be Yeats himself, and in this case, what would his actions to stay by the well imply? And that is what I have to say on the play. Thank you.